Joe Waverly, mobster, enforcer, and feared figure in the Colombo crime family. After ordering multiple hits and serving nearly 2 decades in prison, he's back in Brooklyn. But how did Joe rise to the top, and what role did he play in some of the most brutal gangland murders in NYC? Joe Waverly Cacase, a feared and influential figure in the Colombo crime family, is making headlines once again. Now 78 years old, the veteran mobster, known for orchestrating a series of brutal hits and suspected in the infamous murder of an NYPD officer, is currently residing in a Brooklyn halfway house. Remarkably, this transitional facility is located near Waverly Avenue in Fort Greene, the very neighborhood where Cacase's storied criminal career first began. According to Gangland News, Cacase was released from federal prison in Kentucky a few months ago, marking a significant turn in the life of this battle-hardened figure from the underworld. Cacase is expected to leave the halfway house in May, as per the Bureau of Prisons, upon completing the last stretch of a 20-year sentence. This punishment stemmed from his admission to involvement in 4 mob-related killings, including the chilling 1987 murder of George Ehrenwald, an administrative law judge who became an unintended victim of mob violence. Ehrenwald's execution was a case of mistaken identity. He was targeted because his son, a former federal prosecutor, had been marked for death by the late Colombo boss, Carmine Jr. Persico. Cacase played a direct role in planning this assassination, even going so far as to personally surveil the Manhattan law office shared by the 2 Ehrenwalds. Throughout his criminal career, Cacase climbed the Colombo ranks, evolving from a street-level wise guy in Brooklyn to a powerful figure living in Deer Park, Long Island. The move to Suffolk County mirrored a pattern among successful Colombo associates seeking quieter suburban lives while maintaining their illicit enterprises. By the time his prison sentence concludes, Cacase will have spent nearly 17 years behind bars, a significant chunk of his life. One of the most controversial aspects of Cacase's history is his alleged role in the 1997 murder of NYPD officer Ralph Dawes. Shot 5 times outside his home in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, Dawes' killing was reportedly carried out by a Colombo hit squad. The motive? Rumors suggest it was rooted in jealousy or family honor, as Dawes was married to Cacase's ex-wife at the time. In 2013, nearly a decade into his racketeering sentence, Cacase stood trial for this crime but was acquitted, leaving questions about the murder unanswered to this day. His rise within the Colombo family hierarchy had occurred just a year before Dawes' death, further fueling speculation about his involvement. From the outset, law enforcement viewed Joel Cacase as a prime suspect in the murder of NYPD officer Ralph Dawes. Their suspicions stemmed from a volatile connection. Dawes had married Cacase's ex-wife, Kim Kinogue, a woman with a well-documented penchant for associating with mobsters. Kinogue's previous husbands included Colombo associates Thomas Capelli and Enrico Carini. Carini himself fell victim to a mob hit in 1987. However, her marriage to Dawes marked a break from her usual pattern, as she chose a police officer over a wise guy, an unusual and potentially provocative decision in mob circles. The hit team responsible for Dawes' assassination was composed of several notorious Colombo affiliates. Big Dino Calabro and his cousin, Little Dino Saraceno, served as the gunman, while Joey Caves Campatiello acted as the driver of the crash car intended to divert attention. Overseeing the operation was Tommy Shots Gioeli, who allegedly transmitted the orders originating from Cacase to the team. During Tommy Shots Gioeli's 2012 racketeering trial, where Little Dino Saraceno was also a co-defendant, the prosecution struggled to make the case stick. The jury ultimately found that there wasn't enough evidence to conclusively link Gioeli to the Dawes murder, leaving questions about his exact involvement unresolved. Cacase's role in the killing was even more tenuous, with little concrete evidence tying him to the crime. Prosecutors attempted to argue that Cacase had been enraged by Kinogue's decision to marry a police officer, but there was no testimony or direct proof to substantiate this claim. The lack of a clear motive weakened the case against him, leaving doubts about the true orchestrator of the hit. Adding another layer of intrigue, an alternative theory suggested that the murder might not have been mob-related at all. Instead, it could have involved Russian gangsters, based on a series of suspicious incidents in the weeks leading up to the killing. Just 3 weeks before Dawes was gunned down, he was involved in an unsolved hit-and-run accident, where a van sideswiped his vehicle. A day before that, an altercation unfolded at a Russian nightclub located directly across from Dawes' apartment, during which a limousine driver fired shots. These coincidental events raised questions about whether the officer's death was connected to unrelated tensions rather than mob vengeance. The murder of an NYPD officer reverberated throughout New York City, sparking widespread outrage that extended far beyond the law enforcement community. Prosecutors claimed, based on information from confidential informants, that the assassination had enraged high-ranking members of other organized crime families in the city. These powerful figures viewed the killing as a reckless act that brought unnecessary attention to the underworld, violating the unwritten rule against targeting law enforcement. Allegedly, some of these mob leaders demanded that the Colombo family take swift action to rectify the situation, insisting that whoever had ordered or carried out the hit on the officer should be eliminated to maintain the fragile balance within New York's criminal ecosystem. The Justice Department initially mirrored this fervor, setting their sights squarely on Joel Cacace, a key suspect in the 1997 execution-style murder of Officer Ralph Dawes. Federal prosecutors even sought the death penalty against him, a rare and extraordinary measure in mafia-related cases, underscoring the gravity of the accusations. However, as the trial approached, they abandoned this effort, instead proposing a 100-year prison sentence. Their case, however, ultimately faltered when Cacace was acquitted of the charges, escaping what could have been a fatal blow to his criminal career. Cacace's life had long been marked by violence and survival, stories of which only added to his reputation as one of the Colombo family's most formidable figures. One particularly infamous incident took place in 1976, when 3 armed men attempted to abduct him at gunpoint. Refusing to go quietly, Cacace fought back with astonishing ferocity, managing to kill one of his attackers during the altercation. Despite suffering gunshot wounds to both his chest and hand, he survived the encounter. In an almost cinematic turn of events, he then climbed into his car, bleeding and critically injured, and drove himself to the 61st precinct. In the backseat of his car lay the body of the man he had killed, a stark testament to his defiance and determination to survive. Cacace's life was again endangered during the violent Colombo family's civil war of the early 1990s. On February 26, 1992, as he stopped to pick up clothing from a dry cleaner in Brooklyn, a hit squad ambushed him. The attack left him gravely wounded, and though he managed to escape with his life, he suffered the loss of a testicle in the assault. Despite these injuries, Cacace's survival only reinforced his status as a hardened and resilient player in the dangerous world of organized crime. Throughout his career, Joel Cacace proved time and again that he was not only a ruthless figure, but also one who could endure physical and legal challenges that would have brought most men to their knees. From brutal street fights to courtroom battles, he emerged as a symbol of the violent and unyielding life of a mobster in New York's criminal underworld. The story of the botched assassination that led to a string of additional murders is a chilling reminder of the brutal, yet often chaotic, nature of organized crime. In the 1980s, William Aaron Wald, a Justice Department special prosecutor and one of Manhattan's top prosecutors targeting organized crime, had undoubtedly made enemies among the city's wise guys. However, it remains unclear what specific actions of his ignited the fury of Carmine Persico, the notorious Colombo family boss, who was serving time in prison at the time and remained a powerful figure until his death behind bars years later. Federal prosecutors alleged that Persico's influence extended far beyond prison walls, and he had enough clout to order a murder from his cell. The death warrant, they claimed, was handed down to Joel Cacace, who then passed the gruesome task to Colombo soldiers Enrico and Vincent Carini, along with Frank Smith, a close associate and confidant of Vincent. The orders were clear, but the execution was tragically and fatally flawed. Instead of targeting William Ehrenwald, the trio mistakenly tracked his father, George M. Ehrenwald, a 78-year-old civil attorney and hearing officer for parking violations. They followed him to Young's Chinese Laundry in Long Island City, where they coldly gunned him down. The tragic irony of the mistaken identity left a massive stain on the reputations of everyone involved. For a mob boss like Persico, such a monumental failure in carrying out a direct order was nothing short of catastrophic, a blunder that carried severe consequences within the underworld. The fallout from this mistake reverberated for years. It wasn't until 2003, some 16 years after the murder, that prosecutors unveiled a sweeping indictment that shed light on the killing and the subsequent chain of related murders. Roslyn R. Moskopf, then U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, emphasized the unrelenting nature of justice during a press conference announcing the charges against Kakase and 12 others. The indictment not only included murder allegations, but also detailed various traditional mob activities, such as extortion and illegal gambling. Among those charged were even 2 members of the rival Lucchese crime family, underscoring the interconnected web of New York's organized crime networks. By that time, William Ehrenwald had long left the organized crime strike force and was working as a defense attorney in White Plains. Reflecting on the murder of his father, Ehrenwald admitted his bewilderment. Speaking to the New York Times, he noted that he had never prosecuted Persico personally and couldn't fathom what might have led the mob boss to harbor such resentment toward him. Ehrenwald's suspicions about the true intent of the murder had lingered for years, and the revelations from the indictment seemed to confirm his worst fears. His father had died because of a mistake meant to eliminate him. "It's always painful to lose a loved one," Ehrenwald remarked, "but knowing that my father was an innocent victim, caught in a situation where the true target was me, makes it all the more unbearable." William Ehrenwald's connection to the Persico family was minimal, yet consequential. Years earlier, he had prosecuted Carmine Persico's brother, Ali Boy, though the trial ended in an acquittal. This thread of association, tenuous as it might seem, became part of the complex tapestry of motives and vendettas that led to a spiral of violence within the Colombo crime family. In 1987, following the disastrous and mistaken hit on George Ehrenwald, Joe Waverly Kakase wasted no time in responding. Furious over the bungled assassination, he ordered the elimination of the Carini brothers, Enrico and Vincent, key players in the failed operation. What followed was a series of retaliatory murders that blurred the lines between revenge, damage control, and paranoia. According to federal prosecutors, Kakase enlisted the help of a shooter to eliminate those responsible for carrying out his initial orders. This vicious cycle of murder escalated further when Lucchese soldier Carmine Varial and Bonanno associate Frank Santora executed the Carini brothers. The brothers' bodies were discovered on June 12, 1987, in separate cars parked in Sheepshead Bay, each slumped lifelessly in the back seat, a grim testament to the ever-escalating violence within New York's underworld. The aftermath of the double murder was no less chaotic. On the day of the Carini brothers' funeral, Kakase, riding in a car with his associate Frank Smith, happened to drive past Varial on the street. Kakase recognized the Lucchese soldier as one of the hitmen and pointed him out to Smith. Determined to act swiftly, they set off to retrieve a weapon, intent on killing Varial immediately. However, by the time they returned, Varial had vanished, escaping what might have been an instant death sentence. Undeterred, the vendetta continued. On September 23, 1987, just a few months after the Carini killings, the retaliation reached its climax. Prosecutors alleged that in broad daylight, Frank Smith unleashed a barrage of gunfire outside a social club on Bath Avenue, gunning down both Carmine Varial and Frank Santora. The brazen double homicide cemented the event as one of the more audacious displays of retribution in mob history. Adding a layer of personal drama to this web of bloodshed was Kim Kinogue, whose tangled relationships with members of the Colombo family created a subplot of its own. She had been married to Enrico Carini at the time of his death, becoming a widow in the aftermath of his murder. Later, during her widowhood, interrupted by 2 separate prison stints, she married Joe Waverly Kakase himself. Their union ultimately ended in divorce, but Kinogue wasn't done with the Colombo circle. Her next husband, Ralph Dawes, an NYPD officer, became yet another name tied to the violent legacy of the crime family. The story of Frank Smith's legal troubles and ultimate fate is one of complexity, marked by a series of arrests, convictions, appeals, and cooperation with federal authorities. His journey through the justice system began with his May 1, 1987, arrest on charges related to narcotics trafficking. 2 years later, on May 4, 1989, Smith was convicted and handed a sentence of 15 years to life imprisonment, based on the jury's verdict. However, the case against Smith took a significant turn years later. In 1992, Frank Guerra, a known associate, allegedly confessed that he, not Smith, had been responsible for selling the drugs that led to Smith's conviction. While Guerra's admission was never formalized in a sworn statement, it sparked efforts to revisit the case. By June 1999, Smith's legal team filed a motion to vacate his sentence, arguing that Guerra's statement constituted new evidence that could exonerate him. On June 19, 2003, Justice Leslie Crocker Snyder, the same judge who had sentenced Smith in 1989, made the dramatic decision to vacate his narcotics conviction. Declaring that it was in the interests of justice, she dismissed the indictment altogether, effectively wiping away the original case. This marked a pivotal moment in Smith's life, as the years he had already spent in prison were now retroactively credited toward other sentences. Smith's involvement with the criminal justice system, however, was far from over. An August 12, 2013, letter from the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York detailed his other brushes with the law. In 1992, Smith pleaded guilty in federal court to conspiracy to burglarize a bank, receiving a 3-year sentence to run consecutively with his 1989 narcotics sentence. By 2001, Smith faced a new indictment from the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office and the U.S. Attorney's Office, accusing him of involvement in the murders of Carmine Varial and Frank Santora. On January 16, 2003, Smith signed a formal cooperation agreement with federal authorities. Under this agreement, he pleaded guilty in federal court to violating the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, admitting to participating in 7 murders and conspiring to commit additional homicides. He also entered a guilty plea in Kings County Supreme Court to first-degree manslaughter for his role in the killings of Varial and Santora. For the Varial and Santora case, Smith received a sentence of 6 to 12 years, which was ordered to run concurrently with his narcotics case sentence. By the time his narcotics conviction was vacated in June 2003, Smith had already served nearly all of the 15-year sentence from that case. His time served was also credited toward the bank burglary sentence and the manslaughter sentence for the Varial and Santora murders. Effectively, Smith had completed the entirety of these sentences, and in July 2003, he was granted bail on the remaining federal charges. Following his release, Smith entered the Federal Witness Protection Program as part of his cooperation agreement. However, he eventually chose to leave the program voluntarily. His decision to cooperate with authorities marked a stark shift in his criminal career, transforming him from a mob enforcer into a key government informant. Smith's case remains a testament to the intricate and often unpredictable nature of the legal battles within the world of organized crime.